It is a horrific tragedy and one he never imagined he'd be a part of. But he also knows it's something he cannot run away from. Talking about Uvalde Mayor Don McLaughlin, one of the most visible leaders in that city since what happened at Robb Elementary and the loss of 21 people there. In this Spriester session, we sit down with the mayor to talk about what happened that day and how he sees his city's future.
Talk about that day of the shooting at Robb Elementary and what that day was like for you.
Well, I mean, of course, I was at my office. I have a son that's a first responder and that, and so he runs into my office and tells me, hey, that we have a bailout with the shooting at Robb Elementary School, and that's what everybody thought it was at first, was a bailout, because we've had so many here. It turned out not to be that way. So as soon as he told me, I had to call my wife to come get me because I was on a walker. I just had hip surgery. So I go to Robb Elementary School. And so, you know, I get there, the police are there, you know, people are starting to get there. I think, you know, I think I was the second car in line behind the police car when I got there.
It was still an active scene.
Still an active scene. It hadn't even, I mean, it was just unfolding, and maybe 15 minutes after it started, 10, 15 minutes. So, you know, we were there. There were officers coming from everywhere. You know, there were a lot of DPS. There were federal agents there. There were a lot of officers on that scene that day. And of course, you know, and I will say that being from the outside, there was a lot of confusion even on the outside. It didn't seem like anybody had taken a command position at that time. And so there was a lot of confusion, and finally they started getting, you know, a semblance of order with officers on the outside.
For someone who has lived in Uvalde since you were 1 year old, I'll call you a neighbor.
Sure.
Was it disbelief? Was it sorrow? Was it, I mean, was it all of the above?
It was every bit of that. My heart's still broken for that. I mean, you know, there's not a day that doesn't go by that I wish, you know, I keep thinking maybe it's a dream and I'm going to wake up and it's not going to be real. I mean, Uvalde, Texas, you never expect something like this in Uvalde, Texas. I mean, my heart was broken that day for those children. My heart's broken for those families to this day. I mean, this is something that, you know, children, I mean, parents are not supposed to bury their children. Children are supposed to bury their parents. And, you know, we have 19 families that had to bury their children, and 2 teachers, and 1 teacher's husband. I mean, it's just, it's heartbreaking. It's just, I mean, there's no words to describe it. It's just, I mean, and I know how I feel, so I can't even imagine how these families feel.
Is it still, has the healing begun?
You know, the healing will never be done for these families, you know, and nobody in Uvalde is ever gonna get over this or forget it. We'll get through it and start to move forward. But I mean, for those families, it's just something that they'll, every time they look at a picture, every time they see something for their child, it's gonna bring back memories. I mean, I think the community is to a point where we're ready to start moving forward. Like I said, it's not something we're ever going to get over. We'll get through it, but we also don't have to let this define us either.
You can't walk out the front door of City Hall without seeing the crosses across the street in the city park over there. What does that feel like for you as a citizen?
Well, I mean, it's heartbreaking to see that you know, those crosses are there for the reason they're there, not because they're there. You know, that's heartbreaking still. I mean, that square has been part of Uvalde since 1865. It's a big part of our community. I know that the city is working with the families now to come up with some memorial that would be appropriate for the families, but would also be appropriate for the citizens, so they can still use that plaza and enjoy it. And you know, one of the things I think I heard some of the families say is, well, we want something there for our children so they can enjoy the festivities, you know, when they're ongoing. And I can understand that. I mean, we've got to find something that works for the families and works for the community.
It seemed to be a gathering place for the community. There was so much going on at Robb, so many TV satellite trucks and people and law enforcement at the Robb Elementary site, that it seemed like this was a more accessible site for people to come to and seemed to be a place where people gathered.
It did. For a long time, there were a lot of people gathering here. I mean, you know, Robb has still got stuff. People are still dropping flowers off at Robb, and that not so much here now, but it was a central point, and there were people here every day, and people came in and brought tributes and brought. I mean, I think they put a flower wall up in memory of the kids and different things. I mean, so it was. But this has always been a focal point for any time there's something in Uvalde. You know, pepper rallies, football games. I'm not putting them in the same perspective as this, but anytime there's something, we've had prayer rallies downtown for rain. We've had prayer rallies for families downtown. I mean, you always go to the square and do it.
Yeah, it's the place.
It's the place.
What was it like for a city of Uvalde to have all this attention on it?
Well, I mean, you know,
for you as a mayor to have all this attention on you?
Well, I mean, it was frustrating for as a community because, you know, we had so many people, so many press here in town. The tourists or the people that came to pay respects to the children and that they weren't our problem. But I mean, every time you turned a corner, you had a press group from somewhere sticking a camera in your face, trying to get a sound bite, and you know, really, I got to have a lot of disrecord for the press because they would ask you a question, and then when you saw it on the 6 o'clock news, it's whole different than what you talked about or what you said, and it was just a sound bite. And then if it was a print story and you read the story, well, it came out what you said, but that's not what the headline shows. And so it was frustrating not only to me, but it was frustrating to the families. It was frustrating to our citizens.
Because I think there was also for me, I felt a responsibility to this community because it's part of our viewing area. Sure. But I don't think that was necessarily reflected in every media operation that was here. You agree with that?
I would agree with that. I would say the local stations out of San Antonio, yourself and so forth, were more understanding and more, you know, we could talk to and there. And the bigger outlets, you know, all they wanted was a hit. I mean, you know, you brought people from all over their big anchors from all over the United States to be in Uvalde, Texas to do their deal. I mean, you know, but you know, it was just a story to them. It's our community.
Media attention aside, just the people, when I was in the park the Sunday when the president was here, and just the people that were from Uvalde, but were also from Canepa and Hondo and San Antonio, and people were coming from Fort Worth, people were coming from Houston. I mean, when you saw that outpouring and that attention on Uvalde, what did that mean to you?
Well, it just showed me that there is compassion in this world still, that people still do care about their fellow citizens and their fellow people. I mean, you know, again, this is such a tragedy. 19 children senselessly lost their lives, 2 teachers. I mean, but to see the outpouring of love that came to Uvalde, I mean, and those people were also able to see how this community was coming together. I mean, there's frustration, don't get me wrong, there's still frustration today. But I mean, people would come to Uvalde and see the unity of the citizens of Uvalde coming together for one another. And, you know, I don't think you can find very many people that can say anybody was rude to them in Uvalde when here. Everybody was welcoming and friendly and how you doing? Thank you for coming, and that's the way Uvalde's always been.
That's what I was going to say. I've never had a bad experience when I've come to Uvalde. But do you hope that the coming together and the unity is what's defining Uvalde going forward? I mean, how do we get? I would guess, because we've talked before, that being defined by this tragedy is not something you think is fair to Uvalde.
Well, I mean, that's always going to be a part of Uvalde's history now, and that's, you know, I'm sad that that's part of our history, but we'll own it. It happened here. I mean, those are 19 precious angels, citizens of Uvalde, children of Uvalde, and 2 teachers. So I mean, that will always be part of our history, but we don't have to, and I'm trying to think the right word here to say, we can let their joy and their love, and that you've heard the stories of how much these kids like TikTok and sports and different things, and how much they love life. We can choose that path is a way forward instead of a way of sadness. Don't get me wrong, the parents are always, and those families are always, but the same token, if we get this rec center built here in Uvalde, it would be in memory and dedicated to these 19 children and 2 teachers. Out of that terrible tragedy, look at the blessing that would come to this community for that. The sacrifice and maybe sacrifice isn't the right word to use there, but the tragedy of these kids losing their life, but yet they'll live on in a rec center because it would be dedicated in their memory.
That's part of these kids' legacy.
Yes.
And part of Uvalde's legacy.
Yes.
What do you want to see happen now, today, moving forward?
What I want to see the transparency come out. Let's get through with let's quit the behind the scenes investigation or whatever. Let's put it on the table. It is what it is. Let's be transparent. We're trying to move this thing forward. I don't think this community is going to sit by for 6 months, a year while we investigate. I don't think that's going to be, that's going to do more damage than it is harm. We know what happened that day. We need to get it out there what happened, and that's part of the healing process.
Somebody at home watching this, we're going to run this 6 months after the event. What do you want them to know about Uvalde?
Look, this is a terrible tragedy that happened in Uvalde. It is. And the sad thing is it could happen in any community around us. Uvalde just happened to, the devil chose to choose Uvalde that day. And that's how I look at it. But, again, you saw this community, how they can come together and be together and help one another, neighbor helping neighbor. Doesn't mean there's not frustration in town. Doesn't mean there's not some anger still in the town. But overall, this community cares about one another. And you know what? The other thing I would say, if you see something, say something. Because the sad thing is, there were people who knew. This kid had a nickname as a school shooter. Talk to your kids. Talk to your teenagers. And if you hear that, tell somebody. Maybe we can prevent this. We also got to look at bullying. We've got to be more closer to that. We've got to stop it. We've got to make aware, because whether this kid was pushed out or what, we missed something somewhere. Somebody, we missed it, whether it be in school or somewhere, we missed it. So visit with your kids, talk to your kids, and communicate with them and know what's going on. And hopefully the kids will start talking to their parents, and we can keep tragedies happening. Again, I'll go back to the gun control. I don't know why we don't change the law from 18 to 21. You can't buy a pack of cigarettes if you're not 21. Can't buy a beer if you're not 21. Can't go in a bar, have a drink if you're not 21. So how are we taking anybody's rights away if you can't buy a pistol in Texas till you're 21? So why don't we change the long gun law to 21? There's nothing wrong with that. I've got young kids that they're the ones that said they wouldn't be opposed to it, and so forth. So but we as a country, everywhere, we got to quit this one-sided way. We got to be willing to sit at the table and sit down and talk and have a conversation. Look, we're not going to agree 100% on everything, but together we can all work together and come up with something that works for everyone.
Yeah. Do you feel sometimes as a citizen of Uvalde that you're caught in the middle on all this?
I do.
You've got both sides of the political spectrum that are fighting over what should and shouldn't have happened in Uvalde,
Yeah.
and meanwhile you guys are caught in the middle?
Yeah, I do. We do. We've got this group saying it's their fault, this group saying it's their fault, and that's our problem. We want to point the finger at everybody, but we're the problem. Our politicians are the problem, because it's either got to be one-sided, my way or the highway, and that's not what we elected them for. This council, I can sit there and talk to this council. We may not agree on everything, but we'll work it out till we come up with something that works for everybody. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, but still, we don't have that. The rhetoric coming now is you're either a Republican and you're a bad guy, or you're a Democrat and you're a liberal and a green, and that's not that way. Everybody's not that way, and we need to be able to sit down and talk with one another and come up with solutions that work for everybody.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like we're doing that right now, though.
We don't do it at all. It's very frustrating.
Last question I have for you, Mr. Mayor. You talked about the sadness and the disbelief that this was happening in Uvalde when you were outside Robb Elementary. Have those emotions changed over the months?
No, that sadness is still there. I mean, look, I mean, and I'd prefer when you cut this part out when you do it, but I mean, my grandson lived right next door to the shooter. His house right next door. What if he'd been home that day when the shooter came out of his house? What if he'd been in the front yard playing? So it hit home. And I mean, if my grandson wouldn't have been in a dual language program, he would have been at Robb Elementary School. So I mean, it's I mean, not just because there, but it hits home because, you know, everybody knows everybody in Uvalde. Everybody knows. I mean, even though we're 16,000, I may not know every person on the street, but I promise you I know somebody that knows them, and they know somebody that knows me. I mean, we're still that smaller community.
That's all the questions I have. Is there anything else you want to add? Anything else you want to bring out that you think is important?
You know, I mean, I just, you know, for the families, like I said, my heart's still broken for them. You know, my heart's broken for this community. It was that day. I mean, when they came in that room and told me what, you know, when I finally got the numbers, it was just, I mean, it was devastating. It was devastating. You never hope to hear that, ever. And I don't wish, you know, my worst enemy, I wouldn't wish that on. And these families, like I said, you know, it's something they'll have to bear forever.
Thank you.
Thank you.